Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Business Travel Show Europe. My name's Andy Hoskins and I'm editor of BTN Europe, and it's a pleasure to be back here. Joining me now, first off, kicking off today, is Pat mcDonagh, CEO of Clarity Travel Management. Welcome, Pat. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, no problem.
I think the last time we spoke was probably for a BTN podcast in the depths of the pandemic, when things were looking pretty bleak. Do you want to bring us up to speed? How are things now?
Yeah, so I mean, if you go back to then and you look at where we are now, obviously it's like night and day. We spent, the best part of 2 years in the doldrums, where business was, bubbling along at almost non-existent. Early days during the pandemic, it was negative business. We were doing nothing but refund. Where we are now is since February, really, business has taken off like an absolute rocket. So we're at a time of, almost, I guess, proportionately unprecedented demand in terms of the size of the teams we've all got, the amount of business coming through the door, but also the amount of change and disruption and difficulty in a lot of that business we're doing. So it's very, very busy. We wouldn't have it any other way. But it's a massive improvement on where we were.
Yeah, there's just so much going on at the moment in the industry, isn't there? And we're seeing a lot of disruption as we sort of pick up speed again. TMCs included. Are you recruiting heavily at the moment? I mean, we're hearing a lot of TMCs are having to, because the sort of pent up demand has surprised a lot of people in the industry.
Yeah, we are. We were lucky because what we were able to do, because of our backing, because we went into this quite strong financially, is we were able to hold on to more people than most. So of course everybody benefited from furlough, but probably around, I'd say, September 2020, given the nature of the pattern of furlough extensions and the uncertainty around that, many of us had to act and resized our business at that point. So we took a lot of resource out at that point, but we didn't take as much maybe as some had to. Really, the intention was that when business came back, we were in a position to service that business. But even now, we are operating under headcount. We're trying to recruit as fast as we can. That takes time. We can't just throw people at the job. Physically, there aren't the people out there to actually bring in a lot of the time, and what we've got to do is make sure that we target every opportunity for recruitment. So that's, of course, the experienced hire market, less experienced people who we can train. We've got back to work schemes, apprenticeship schemes, intern schemes, looking at things like neurodiversity as well and the opportunities that presents, and just trying everything we can to get quality people, well-trained people on the phones, helping customers as quickly as we can. So that's going okay. It's fair to say it's a candidates market. It's a very, very difficult market from a recruitment perspective. Everybody wants a very small pool of people. And if you go back to what happened during the pandemic, pre-pandemic, there were probably 12,000 people employed by TMCs in the UK. That went as low as 6,000. Not all 6,000 of those are coming back. The industry could probably do with all 6,000 of them coming back. And, I think that's not going to be the case. So we have to look at it proactively. How are we going to grow our own? How are we going to introduce new people to the industry, get them up to speed, and get them doing the great job we've always done for our customers?
Yeah, and the staff shortages at airlines and airports as well, and the problems we're seeing there sort of compounds the problem for you, doesn't it? Because you've got more work to do for your customers. It does.
I've got a great deal of sympathy for the airlines and for the airports. I think what you're seeing now is, you're seeing what are normally world-class operations struggle with the circumstances. There are some in there who have always struggled. They struggled pre-pandemic. They've been exposed now. They're probably amongst the worst. But everybody's got a challenge. There are probably one or two airlines, certainly in the UK, who are getting through this better than others. But in general, it's very difficult. It's often not within their control, so it could be a third-party baggage handler. It can be the airports. I see today Heathrow has announced, further requirements to cancel. I think it has to come from the airports. I think if it comes from the airports, I think it's fair. But if it's last minute and it's that level of, instant disruption, that's incredibly difficult for us all to deal with. So I'd like to see a more proactive approach through the rest of the summer. I'd like to see the airlines working with the airports to find out a fair way of doing this, and get to a position where we're not promising something we can't deliver.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of forward booking volumes, as we've recovered, a lot of people have been taken by surprise, as we said. What are you expecting for the end of the year? Have you readjusted forecasts?
We actually haven't we're trading beyond where we expected to be. Yeah. We haven't reforecast yet. We're probably likely to at some stage. We reforecast last year 12 times. So, it really didn't, the forecast never survived a month, because I think probably because, things went on longer than anyone expected. We had, seasonal waves of coronavirus. We obviously had additional lockdowns and restrictions we didn't expect. And the travel landscape was really difficult. What we see now, it's difficult to pin down how much of this demand is pent-up demand and how much of it is consistent long-term demand. And, I know clients are struggling to predict that as well. So, everybody's kind of looking at what the future may look like, trying to consider, how their volumes are going to be impacted in the long term, and we're trying to aggregate that position to understand what we need. What we do know is that in the short term, we need to get more people on the front lines, handling calls, answering customer queries and dealing with some of the disruption. In the long term, I think we still will see a reduction in overall demand for some time. We're hoping that we just grow general business levels beyond that in terms of new client acquisition and get back to the size of business we were in 2019 through a combination of what we had already and obviously new customer wins. So, I think it's easier if you've got a growth mentality because it's not going to stop you recruiting people. I think if you think it's, a short-term bump in demand that's then going to settle down, I think you'd be more reluctant to recruit people.
Are you seeing many customers come on board from a previously unmanaged environment?
One or two, yeah. What we've seen is quite a deal of success on some of the frameworks that we're on in higher education and in central government, so that's going well. Unmanaged, I think if you were unmanaged before, I think generally you're probably still, coming to terms with what travel looks like for you now. We see one or two where maybe they think the landscape's a bit more difficult than it was before. What we see more latterly is the corporate market start to come back away from those frameworks and start to assess the market now, because you have to bear in mind during the pandemic travel wasn't necessarily resourced within businesses either, so nobody was prepared to look at it. Now it's back. It's almost a quite reactive kind of approach to it. It's like now we have a challenge and we need to deal with it. And I appreciate why that's happened, because if there was nobody on travel for the last 2 years, you've got to come up to speed. So we're seeing the corporate market start to come to the table too.
Yeah. Okay. And just quickly then, you've just published a white paper, I believe, 10 quick wins for travel management.
For restarting your program.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, really, they're born out of exactly that. Businesses re-emerging from this and saying, right, okay, so what do we do now? And it starts with some very basic things like the supplier landscape is different. We just talked about that. It's chaotic. It's challenging. You need help navigating that, but you also need to manage that back within your business with your stakeholders. So you would think that people would understand if they watch the news that they would see that there are challenges with resourcing, that there are challenges with the borders, there are rail strikes taking place. But when it comes down to it, sometimes the empathy, the sympathy isn't there, and the traveller expects a seamless experience. They need to be prepared for that. So managing internal stakeholders, understanding what the market looks like, imminent priorities, if you like, getting on top of metrics, understanding what good looks like from a service perspective and how you're going to manage the here and now, right through to some of the more strategic pieces. And it's aimed at all kinds of audiences. You may have people who have never managed the category before. I think we've got quite a few here today and yesterday. That's potentially because travel, was, if you like, the resource was taken away through the pandemic. Category managers are now covering more categories. Maybe they're returning to travel having managed it many years ago. Well, it's different, it's more challenging. And then also, for those who maybe have put travel down for a little while and are now picking it up again because the business wasn't prepared to talk about it because they had to get people back into offices. They had to understand what that working pattern looked like. Well, now's a good time to have a look at those quick wins, see what you can take from them, work with your TMC to understand how you're going to approach things moving forward.
Okay, brilliant. Well, it's been great to catch up in a slightly more positive environment than we last spoke.
Definitely, yeah.
And I wish you all the best going forward, and we'll catch up again soon.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And back to the show floor.